So let's
agree.
Move on then. So you have got obviously now this kind of lettings agent, and just tell us about just for background for people, what are the properties that you look after?
So we started off managing. Our first property was a 3-bed HMO. It was an investor in the PIN meeting that says, yes, you can manage my property. And Thomasina is still a landlady client today and a friend. So that's really great news. But we started taking on properties like that. So student HMOs was kind of where we started. And then we obviously take on professional HMOs. So that's kind of what we're known for. We definitely manage single family homes as well. I think the HMO thing kind of stood us in good stead because the level of communication and the level of certification, it's all, there's more to do, more communication, more payments, more maintenance, more certificates, So there's managing a HMO is, if you can do that, you can manage other properties as well.
Okay, so you're not scaring me off, are you, when I'm buying my HMO?
No, it's great. I mean, it's great. I mean, it's fine. I mean, it's nothing to be scared of particularly. I think as long as you're okay with the process, and certificates is the main thing. Are you certificated? Yes. Do I know how to speak to my tenants? Can they speak to me? Yes. Being fair and open, and that it does take time though, which is probably a consideration. Managing a HMO is definitely not passive. It's not a passive property investment.
No, absolutely. And I think it's so important to understand that you are offering a service. It is a business, isn't it? So if you choose to manage it yourself, then you need to be knowledgeable. You need to have it. There's no excuses for not knowing what you don't know, basically, with those kind of things. So yeah, I mean, I'm a huge fan of having other people do the things that they're experts in.
Yeah.
So as I said, when I tried to find, a tenant for my rent to buy, it wasn't my forte. It wasn't something that I was really good at. And I very quickly just thought, what are you doing? Really, you just, and in fact, from that, it's meant that I've kept on that letting agent. And she now every year is, we've got an agreement where she comes and just makes sure that we've got everything in place. If anything has changed, if there are new things, because that just makes me feel more comfortable. And obviously my tenant, I want to ensure that we offer the best for them too.
Yes.
So there's always kind of that third party if we need as well. So yeah, I really like that.
Yeah.
So there has been so much in the press recently, and it's been kind of building up over many years about, there's terrible landlords out there. Equally, there's terrible tenants. And, there's been things like, buy-to-lets are dead. There's quite some extreme press things, which, let's be fair, I don't really listen to the press because they're not necessarily, they're quite sensationalized, aren't they?
Yeah.
I mean, obviously you are managing 250 houses. Of those, it sounds like a very large proportion are houses of multiple occupation. So you've got, I would imagine, a minimum of 4 or 5 people in each one, and some of them are going to be bigger. Are you feeling that? Do you think, that there shouldn't be landlords anymore? Should we let the big boys, should we let the banks do all the management of this? Where are you at on your thoughts?
So the private rented sector offers an invaluable service that cannot be replaced. So there's no way that's going to happen. Now there might be an edging towards big corporate, sort of funds and that type of management. But the truth is that the reality today is that's not the case. So the UK economy, tenants, government, etc., need the private rented sector. So be happy that you provide a valuable service to the country and your tenants more specifically. So that's broadly, it is where it is. That's where it's going to be. So if you look at what Sally said, I remember a few years ago, and it sort of still resonates. Sally Lawson was the home ownership in the UK is higher than the rest of Europe, and which way do you think we're going to go in home ownership? the balance of tenants and home ownership. So it's likely that the rental market, private rent sector, will get bigger, a lot bigger, in the years and decades to come. So I think we're in a growing market. We will continue to provide a valuable service to tenants in the country. So I think that's going. The fundamentals aren't changing for me.
Yeah. I'm totally with you. We've never been. We're in basically a small island, and it's not getting any bigger. I mean, not that I've seen. It's not like Dubai where they're actually growing out into the sea, are they? We're a little island, and we've got a lot of people. So historically, we've always had lots of people coming in and some people coming out, and it's growing and growing. The number of people living here. So we've got to have more houses. And as you're seeing as well, a lot of the single houses are now being split up into even smaller places, like these 1 beds for HMOs. So I'm completely with you. I see it as something that's really growing. But equally, I feel that a lot of this kind of, so we're going to go on and talk about these, the acts that are coming through. Yeah. But it just doesn't seem kind of right. So a lot of things that are coming in, when you look at some of the rulings that have come in over the last couple of years, all that's happened is the rents that your average tenant is paying are just massively increasing.
Yeah.
It doesn't really seem to be kind of answering or reflecting what perhaps the governments are wanting. And I do not want to get into any kind of politics. Yeah. But for me, the more pressure you're putting on the landlords, it seems that therefore you're seeing more rents. And actually, that's not a good thing for the tenants. No. It seems a bit of a shame. So so I just wanted to just understand. So anyone who is listening, we've lost Chris again, he's popped out again. Anyone who is listening, do you currently have tenants? If you have tenants, please put a 1 in the chat. And if you don't have tenants, perhaps you don't have a property or you have guests, put a 0, and that will give us a bit of an idea where we're at there. So obviously we had this renters reform bill that the Conservatives were creating, and they got really far along, hadn't they? We all thought that this was it, and this was going on. And then suddenly we obviously have a new government coming in, and it's changed from renters reform. Mm-hmm. Sounds, things need to be changed, to renters' rights. It's quite different terminology, isn't it? How are you feeling about that kind of terminology there?
How do I feel about the terminology? So I think my job as an agent is to understand what's being said and how it might impact a landlord and tenant. And I think it's about knowledge, knowledge and all that kind of stuff. For me, the fundamentals haven't changed and won't change. You still have to provide a good house, good value, and the tenant has to do some things like pay rent and report maintenance. So fundamentally, it's not changed. Fundamentally, properties go up in value, just because of inflation. That's what happens. Inflation means that things go up, and if you're in an asset that inflates, then that's kind of fine, and that's good. There is a balance, I think, that's shifting, and I think this is about what investment class do you want to invest in. This isn't necessarily. If you're okay with the responsibilities you take on as a landlord, either in the past or going forward in the future, if you're okay with it, you're okay with it. And those responsibilities may have a slight twist on them, but ultimately you are responsible for quite a lot as a landlord. The habitability of your house, the structure, and good, all that good stuff. So I think if your investment class is property, that is what comes with owning property. Is a massive responsibility to your tenants. I think if you're comfortable with that, then that's fine. Just understand where you're at with it. If you're not, then there are other things you can invest in, like stock shares and more passive things. So I think we can go into sort of the nuances maybe, but I think broadly speaking, legislation will always change, and it's part of the market. And property you've got to be super sort of versatile with it as well, I think. So when you bought a property 15, 20 years ago, it was different. And when you buy one in the next 10, 15 years, it'll be different again. So just understanding what market you're operating in is really important. Not being scared of legislation, but just understanding what it might mean. Hopefully that wasn't too wafty.
But no, I really like that. And I think that was one thing when we spoke about networking is at that time, I remember, attending a few what I would call property networking events, and everyone just seemed very kind of positive and solution focused. It was kind of like, okay, well, this is clearly an issue, but what can we do to work around it? And that's certainly what I see. I think change is inevitable, isn't it? And it's just how we react to that. Yeah. Exactly, going back to what you said, if you are running a property business, and you're offering these, as you mentioned, a really good home, very good value, all of these things, and you're doing it in a correct, compliant way, then that should be good. There are going to be, the odd, rogue landlord, but equally there's going to be some rogue tenants as well. And it's ensuring that we keep those thoughts in reality, because it would sound like, every tenant's really bad, equally every landlord's really bad, and that's just not true.
No, and the sort of economics of a rental kind of is that we haven't got, like you said before, we haven't got enough properties in the UK to kind of service it. So if you put a decent property on the market, it will get oversubscribed by inquiries and applications. That's quite a good place to be if you're providing a service into that market. That's quite a nice place to be. There'll be a rental limit you can hit. There's a value equation you've got to be aware of, and your competition is the landlord next door. But if you know all of those things, you've got it's a pretty strong market out there. There shouldn't be really a need for voids. Buying well is really important, and tenant relationships really important. So your agent is definitely part of that. But the agent does act on the instructions of the landlord. So you have a very strong influence about how your tenant views you and your product.
I think that's a really, I really love the way you brought that up, because that's something always to be aware of, isn't it? If you've got a problem, so if you've got a void, it's kind of actually looking and taking a step back and thinking, well, why is that? Is my product, my property, is it not good enough? Or whatever, is my letting agent, are they, not working with me? Am I not doing things? Whatever it might be. So it sounds like if you have currently a problem, it's worth taking a few steps back. We're in a market where actually you should be running a really sort of healthy business.
Yeah. I think there's a difference in between an investment, which property is, but property is a different type of investment. It's offering a product and a service, ultimately. And I think if you invest in stocks and shares, that's not doing that. That is just buying an asset with no responsibility at all. So I think property is not the same as stocks and shares. It's very, very different. You are in a marketplace, you have a product, you've got to market it well, you've got to service it, and you have responsibilities and liabilities. And I think that's quite a different set of things to consider when buying a property, because you don't go into it for the joy of speaking to tenants. You don't, but that is something that you have to be comfortable with. Yeah,
absolutely. So this renters' rights bill, then, it does feel like it is giving tenants much more protection. So obviously, what do you see as kind of the key changes that might affect, current buy-to-let landlords? Yeah. And is there a way that you feel they can sort of prepare for these changes?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the big two are the abolition of Section 21, sort of no fault eviction, and then the other one is the every tenancy starts as a periodic tenancy, and that kind of doesn't feel great. So if you sort of like, what feelings that conjure up? I can't get rid of my tenant. Section 21. That's true. That mechanism won't exist. Okay. So, but it's being replaced by something else or strengthened. So Section 8 process is still there. So why would I want my house back? Okay. So the Section 8 process does allow you to have your house back for reasons that you can, you want to sell, you want to move back into it, antisocial behaviour, blah, blah, blah. Lots of reasons you might want to have your house back. all of which are catered for in Section 8 process. So that's fine. It's just that the mechanism is changed. You need to give a reason for it and demonstrate the reason for it. You can't just say, please leave, and then they can leave. So it does make it harder. It's harder, is that the right question? It just changes the process, really. But you can get your house back, is the point.
And inherently, I think we have to go back to the reason why people would buy a property is if you're buying a buy-to-let property, you want a tenant to be in there, don't you? You want it to be paying, you want them to be happy, you want them to be doing it. So inherently, and as long as you can ensure that it's kept in good condition, and you can also ensure that the condition of it is kind of upheld, then that is actually what you want to do. So I think a lot of the times here is that kind of fear again of a bad tenant. So that's where working really hard and understanding your the letting agent and who they are, how they deal with it, what successes they've had, and doing that kind of due diligence, because inherently to get your property back, from what you've described, a Section 8, there should be a reason why you want it back. But I suppose there is that kind of fear. So inherently, it's again just going back to the due diligence on the tenant, and just making sure that they're going to work for your particular property. I mean, but the situation's changed, so you can't guarantee that your tenant will pay you rent. That's not but there are insurance products that exist exactly because of that. You can get insurance products to guard you against that from as little as say £30 a month. So if you've got one property and you rely on the rent to pay the mortgage, which is the case in a lot of instances, and you can't afford to be without that rent, then protect it. There's an insurance product out there for you. So sometimes it's not that tenants don't want to pay, it's they can't pay. That might be a. I remember Sally sort of saying that the cost of living crisis was a bigger concern than COVID. During COVID, we were all protected by furloughs and all this kind of stuff. The money was flowing. Cost of living's different. Inflation goes up, bills, rent, etc., etc. We're not protected against, or the UK is not protected as well as that against that. So there was a feeling that puts landlords at risk. I don't think it's had as an effect quite as much as it may have done, but you can protect your portfolio, your properties against the risk of your tenant not paying, assuming they're referenced in the right way. In the first instance, you can get an insurance product against it. Okay, and that presumably you encourage that in your letting agent. You're very clear that's these are the options to you as a landlord.
Our portfolio landlords tend not to go for it, but our sort of single one or two sort of landlords do, just because the portfolio guys have been there longer, professional sort of landlords, and know that they can afford to, if a rent's not being paid, they can cope with that. But that's not the case for everybody. So I think the rent guarantee sort of insurance is a really good option just to guard against that. What if my tenant doesn't pay?
Yeah, fantastic. And then as far as, ensuring that, each tenant is compliant, do you think there's any kind of changes there to ensure, if you do have a problematic tenant?
In making sure that who's moving into your house, or sort of when they've moved in, what do you do?
Yeah, so basically practical steps to ensure that, during these changes that they remain compliant.
I think it's mainly on the sort of the start of the tenancy type of changes. So the Section 21, that's ending the tenancy. The initial 6-month term, that can be a worry, particularly for student landlords. But by default, I think the most recent version of legislation suggests that the tenant can't give notice in the first 4 months, and they must give 2 months' notice. So even though the tenancy is periodic, they won't be able to leave until for 6 months. So it's a period tenancy with the 6 months lead into it. Does that kind of make sense? It's not a fixed term. It's a different terminology, but it is a 6-month initial period.